Hello, my name is Sanders Austin Sapinsley, and this is my assignment on the Paris Agreement. I believe man-made climate change is important because it is the biggest threat that the world faces today. Climate change looks at long-term weather patterns, not just what occurs on a day-to-day basis. We are seeing deviations from the expecting model trends due to increases in CO2 emissions. Many people in the United States do not see this as a problem, but we are not the ones that are seeing the effects today. Smaller, undeveloped countries do not have the ability to adapt to the increased weather variations, leading to increased deaths in the elderly and young. Many climate deniers claim that the humans are not to blame for climate change. They say has naturally changed throughout its past without anthropogenic input. Throughout geological time, there has been significant changes in climate change due to the Milankovitch cycle, the nature of Earth's orbit, tidal, and wobble. Climate has always gone through glacier and interglacial periods. Climate models are showing that we are deviating from the cycle, and it is due to greenhouse gas emissions. We should have reached our peak value in the cycle, but we have continued to increase in the CO2. Models are showing anthropogenic effects to be the cause of increased CO2. The science is out there. We are the reason for an increase in the greenhouse gases, and we need to fix it. Climate change will have unpredictable effects on the world's water systems. The Greenland ice sheet is melting along other glaciers and ice caps. This is all contributing to the sea level rise. Rising sea levels put cities like New York at risk of flooding and will cause millions of people to relocate. As temperatures rise, tree lines will gradually retreat north. Climate change will cause an increase in floods and droughts, which will have an impact on food supplies, caused by phonological mismatch. Countries in East Africa are already experiencing the worst droughts faced in years. There has also been an increase in the worldwide tree mortality in recent years due to prolonged droughts. If the world increased more than 2 degrees Celsius, scientists are afraid we will see too much newly deforested soils releasing tons of CO2 into the atmosphere. More CO2 in the air leads to more warming. Diseases like cholera are waterborne diseases that are showing up due to increased concentrations in water sources. This is from the water evaporation from increased temperatures. Scientists are expecting outbreaks of West Nile because we are seeing all of those droughts conditions, and this is what makes this, and that is when it strikes. The Paris Agreement is an agreement within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, dealing with greenhouse gas emissions, mitigation, adaptation, and finance starting in the year 2020. Their goal is to slow the increase in global average temperatures to well below 2 degrees Celsius. It also asks successful countries to help out ones in need. All countries must submit intended nationally determined contributions, or an INDC, which are like blueprints on how they are going to reduce emissions in their country. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPC, coordinates all of this. This panel was formed by the United Nations to look at the state of climate change and the social and economical impacts. They were not formed to look at human-caused climate change. This is just part of their findings. In the past, similar agreements have not gone through because of the United States not signing on. Major countries like China and Russia are not going to be affected by the United States not joining, but smaller countries are, because they will not receive the aid that the United States would have given out. Since the United States has pulled out, it sends a message to the rest of the world how little we care about the risks of climate change poses on the planet. It makes the United States look like we don't have values for the environment. But there are many cities and state officials who are willing to fulfill our promise to reduce emissions here in the United States. The IPCC had their first meeting, the Montreal Protocol, in 1998. They set up a framework where high emitters like the United States and other big countries would need to act first in banning chlorofluorocarbon and a greenhouse gas. In 1997, the IPCC met for climate change. The US didn't really go for this, and it led to a failed attempt. In 2009, the 2-degree warning level was identified by scientists. At the Copenhagen Accord, countries made pledges for emissions reductions and promised to fund poor countries. In 2015, we did just that. COP21 had all countries who wanted to participate submit an intended nationally determined contribution to reduce emissions, and INDC. The 180 countries signed on who would contribute more than 90% of our emissions. I believe that pulling out of the agreement was not morally justified. We are already seeing the effects of climate change. It is happening right now. Third world countries are experiencing droughts already, and they are the ones who are going to get hit the worst. Economically, switching to alternative energy is beneficial. Larger countries like China are switching to alternative energy, and that is where all the money is going. Climate change is affecting species environment, which leads to species mortality. Many of the species we get ecosystem services from are the species that are being affected the most. There are droughts and increased disease leading to massive tree die-offs worldwide. Signing the Paris Agreement will stimulate the alternative energy economy as well as the world's economy. It is also unethical to withdraw from an agreement you have already agreed to, especially if the agreement is preventing climate change, something affecting people worldwide. I believe that we are responsible for cleaning up the mess that we made, and we should educate others from making the same mistakes. There are no repercussions in deciding not to regulate the emissions Obama agreed to for the IPCC. It was signed in an executive order, so the Senate never signed the agreement, and the IPCC can't even do anything. If the United States agreed, we would have to lower our emissions much greater than other countries. We would also need to help other countries by giving them money to help develop alternative energy. There are some reasons why pulling out may be good, but overall, I think it is a bad idea. Just because the United States government doesn't agree doesn't mean that the American people don't. Many United States leaders have band together to meet the requirements. I believe that this is very important, and meeting the Paris Agreement is what ought to be done to address climate change. We all need to have the same long-term goals if we want strong mitigation. Actions cannot be taken if there is no clear perspective on what the long-term goals of mitigation are. We need to act fast and start mitigation actions if we wanted a chance to reduce global risk. The unknowns about the future and knowledge on climate change limit our ability to pin down the future changes we will see, and the first steps in increased mitigation efforts is to get people talking about climate change.